Watch this player's incredible 2-year transformation. Then discover the one friction secret that finally unlocked the topspin he was missing. Friction and collision are actually contradictory. They work against each other. If you want more friction, you necessarily get less collision. Now, is this ball spinny? Under normal circumstances, yes, it's very spinny. But because my racket is farther from the table than my partner's, watch what happens when she adds more force to the spin loop. See, it starts going long. So do you understand why your ball lacks spin? It's because when you try to add spin, you go too far upward, which makes the ball too short. Watch, let me show you a short spin loop. See my hand out here, the ball won't go long. My hand stays down, and immediately it stays on the table. So if you want spin, you can't keep the ball too short. Too short creates another problem. It's easy for your opponent to attack because the spin hasn't had enough time to take effect. Next, the answer is you need to push forward into the ball as you friction it. You have to drive through the ball with your friction, not just lift upward. Watch, here's the common mistake. My partner tries to add spin by sweeping upward like this. The ball barely rotates, but the moment you push forward into the ball while frictioning, watch the difference. See how the racket drives forward through contact? The spin changes immediately. That forward pressure into the ball is what sends it deep to the baseline with real rotation. Without it, you're just brushing upward, and the ball dies short with weak spin. Now, so how exactly do we push forward into the ball? What generates that forward drive? Two things. First, your fingers. When you friction the ball, your fingers can't be soft and passive, they need to press firmly, pushing the racket face forward into the ball at contact. Your grip has to be solid and assertive in that moment. Second, your forearm. To make the contact even more solid, your forearm needs to drive forward to meet the ball. You're reaching out toward the incoming ball with your forearm, pushing through it. So it's fingers pressing firm, forearm driving forward. Together they create that sensation of punching through the friction. Watch my partner try it now. There, that's better. You can feel the difference when the forward push is there. Now freeze at the contact point for a moment. Hold it right there, freeze. Don't move. Now look at where my partner's stroke has ended up. The racket angle is actually fine, the face is nicely closed. The legs aren't the issue here either. So what's wrong? Look at where the racket has stopped. The friction phase of the stroke has already carried the racket all the way up to here. If you've used up your entire range of motion just on the friction, where is the room left to accelerate? Exactly, there's none. You need to start the friction earlier and keep it compact, so that by the time you finish the friction phase, your racket is still only about here. That way you still have space ahead of you for acceleration. This is the core problem for amateur players. They use up their whole stroke on friction and leave nothing for the follow-through. If you want to friction the ball, you commit to friction through the whole contact. If you want to drive forward, you push from back to front. Think of it like serving. When you hook your wrist to generate spin, you can't start spinning from the very beginning. You contact the ball, give it that burst of spin, and then you still need to send it forward so the ball actually travels. You can't just spin the whole time or the ball dies. Split it into two phases, understand? Your friction phase tops out right around chest height. Watch, at most, the racket reaches about this angle. Now, if you want a more powerful loop, your friction has already brought the stroke up to here. With a stroke this big, you can't generate heavy spin. It's only in that one brief snap, that sudden moment of grip, where the real spin happens. After that sharp friction moment, the rest of the stroke is acceleration. So when we want to generate heavy spin, watch, the actual friction zone is just this small. See how I push forward with my forearm through this compact window? The ball comes off with serious rotation. And after that, there's still room to accelerate and add speed. Right now we're working on a spin loop, and even with a spin loop the direction needs to go slightly forward, not just up. Your friction must be a brief, concentrated burst, not a long sweeping motion through the whole stroke. Keep it small, keep it sharp. That's what makes the spin intense and focused. Watch my partner try again there, that instant, that snap. That's the feeling we want. Listen to that contact sound. You can hear the ball has become much more spinny. That sharp, crisp pop tells you the friction is concentrated. Now keep going, push forward through the ball as you loop. Right now your rotation is coming entirely from the wrist. Watch, if I do the friction contact correctly, look at my racket head. See, the actual range of motion isn't that large. But look at what you're doing, your wrist has gone all the way through, flipped over, completely loose. Way too much wrist movement. Do you know what happens when your wrist is that loose? Watch, you can't control the ball. That's why you keep missing half-high balls. You want to hit with power, you want the ball to land on the table, but the moment your wrist wobbles, you lose it. Let me ask you, when you're actually playing, should the wrist be loose and floppy? If it is, you absolutely need to fix this. It's a serious problem. What I'm teaching here is using finger pressure to drive a controlled rotation for friction. The wrist stays stable, it doesn't flap around. Watch this closely. The actual movement is extremely small, see? When the ball comes, the fingers and wrist push firmly into the friction, but the motion is compact and locked in. It's not a big sweeping wrist action. Think of it as a short, explosive burst, small range, high concentration of force. That's completely different from a loose wrist swinging through. This point is absolutely essential to remember. After that, so how do you maintain that control? Here's the key, never think of friction as something your wrist produces by swinging. It's your fingers pressing forward, giving a firm, short push into the ball. That's what creates the friction. Watch the racket face, if you didn't know what to look for, you'd barely see it move. The motion is that subtle and contained. Now compare that to a loose wrist. The moment you let the wrist swing freely, watch what happens, you simply cannot control the ball. It gets even worse on the backhand side. With a floppy wrist on the backhand, the racket face goes everywhere. Once you lock this in and keep the wrist stable, your consistency improves immediately because you eliminate that uncontrollable variable. Looping is its own topic, don't mix it up with what we just covered. Now let's talk about driving forward with power. My partner sends me a ball with heavy backspin, watch this. You can feel how much spin is on that ball, right? So can I still power loop it? Watch. Yes, I absolutely can. Why? Because of that initial phase, the fingers and wrist create a short, sharp friction contact right at the front of the stroke. That small burst of friction lifts the ball over the net. Once that friction is done and I'm not jammed by the incoming spin, the conditions for a power loop are met. After that first friction phase, I simply drive forward with full commitment. So the sequence is clear. Friction first with the fingers, then accelerate forward. The friction has to be sufficient before you push through. Exactly, because of this friction issue, I used to dump power loops into the net too. But now that I emphasize this first phase, the second phase can be treated like topspin. That later forward force is really the key. I don't know if you can feel this at the table yet, but here's how it works for me. Once I feel I've generated enough friction, and my feel isn't perfect, but it's close. Once I sense the ball will clear the net from my finger and wrist action alone, I commit boldly forward. That's the essence of the stroke. You need to find that same feeling, the moment of contact where your fingers and wrist have done enough to lift the ball over the net, and everything after that is confident forward acceleration. Watch this one. If I feel like I can't lift the ball, I just hold firm and support it through. But the instant I feel I've got enough spin, I push forward aggressively. This same principle applies to